Now when we are so happy about our faith and enjoy our faith, we should remember certain people who risk their life and sacrifice their life for us. Especially the missionaries who came to our own countries to preach the gospel. The people of God who sacrificed their life to increase our faith. And today, the Holy Catholic Church is celebrating one such missionary who was full of zeal for the Christ our Lord Jesus and went to unimaginable ways of life, and he lived unimaginable way of life and sacrificed his life and saved thousands of people. And that is Saint Joseph was. Saint Joseph was born in 1651, April 21st, in Benolim, Goa. And his father was Christopher Was and Maria Miranda. And he was a holy man from the childhood. He used to show compassion and mercy to the poor people. And his father used to be so proud of him because he used to tell everyone, my son will become one day a great man. And he used to show compassion to the poor people from neighborhood. He used to visit all the houses. He used to help everyone. He was so faithful and committed to God. And then looking at him, his nature, his character, his mother used to call him my little saint. And he used to go to church every day. And there is a legend, there is a story said in his parish that when he comes to the church early in the morning, the church door used to open automatically for him. And he used to go inside the church to celebrate Holy Mass and spend a lot of time in the presence of the Lord. Looking at his pious nature, his father decided to encourage him to become a priest. Later he joined the seminary and he became a priest in 1676 for the Archdiocese of Goa. And once he became a priest there, he did a lot of good things. He started a Latin school in Sankoli, and he was there helping so many people. He used to visit all the houses, and he used to be very he was so pastoral. He went to every house and used to listen to their confession, and he was so compassionate. And then meanwhile, he heard about the missionary, the people of the Catholics suffering in Sri Lanka. So he was inspired to go to Sri Lanka and preach the gospel. But there was a big problem. Sri Lanka was, those days it was called Ceylon. And Ceylon was controlled by Dutch missionaries, and they are not Catholics, but they are Calvinists. And the Calvinists were totally against the Catholics, and therefore in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon, those days all the Catholic churches were destroyed by the Calvinists, and all the Catholics were persecuted, and everyone was forced to be converted to the Calvinism. And therefore all the Catholics who lived there, they removed all the signs of Catholic Church, removed the rosaries and pictures of Our Lady and all these things. They removed it completely from their home, and everyone was in disguise, living a Catholic faith in disguise. And Saint Joseph was, the Father Joseph was, came to know about these, and then he wanted to risk his life and go to Sri Lanka. But his authorities sent him to, instead of sending to Sri Lanka, he was sent to Mangalore. Those days it was called Canara, South Canara or Dakshina Kannada. And he went to Mangalore, and he was there appointed as a parish priest, and then he was serving the people. And he was so compassionate and merciful and helping so many people, and because of which everyone called him a saint. And he used to perform miracles. There were so many miracles were attributed to his name. And those days there was a confusion going on between Padravado and Apostolic Propaganda Fide congregation from Rome. There was a confusion between Goa and also from the Pontifical Propaganda Fide of the Rome. and he was caught up in between. And then somehow he made sure to follow the truth, and he supported the Pope and was in connection with the Pope. And then later he was managed to bring some peace in that area by talking to all those who were involved in this confusion. And then once when he was in Mangalore, since he was very famous because of his good work and his saintly life, some non-Christians wanted to eliminate him because Saint Joseph was so holy, and he converted so many people to the Catholic Church, and the church became so vibrant. Therefore, local non-Christians wanted to kill him. One day at midnight, some people came to his parish and called him and said, "Please come with us, Father. There is a man who is waiting for a last sacrament. Please come and help him." Then Joseph knew something wrong, but still there is a soul waiting for a priest to give the last sacrament. Therefore, he decided to follow with these people. And then they took him to a lowly place, to a hilly area, and there they surrounded him and took knife and other weapons to kill him. Then immediately Joseph, who had a staff in his hand, he kept the staff on the mountain, on the rock, and then he knelt down there in prayer. Immediately, and from under the staff, the spring of water came out. Seeing these non-Christians who were about to kill him, they got frightened, and they came to know the holiness of Saint Joseph. They all ran away from that area, and he was saved, and he came back to his parish and continued his ministry. And after his name was reached out to the non-Christians too. And later he went back to Goa, and then he became the part of the congregation of the oratory of Saint Philip Neri. And then he was a priest there, and then later he asked the permission of the superiors to go to Sri Lanka and preach the gospel, and everyone was afraid to send him because it was very dangerous to go to Sri Lanka and preach because of the Calvinist and Dutch soldiers. But somehow he managed to get the permission, and then he traveled to the South India, and then he entered into Tamil Nadu, and he learned Tamil language, and then he somehow managed to get into a ship, and he hid all the signs of his priestly signs, removed it, and he only kept one altar stone to celebrate Holy Mass. And then he got into the ship. He didn't have money or food and anything with him, and he had his servant, his name was John. He was also accompanying him. These both got into the ship. Normally ship used to take 3 or 4 days to reach the Sri Lanka, Ceylon, but it took almost more than 1 week. And then meanwhile, because of the climate, weather was so bad, and then all the people, they all lost their food. The food was very less, and poor Josephus and his friend John, they didn't have any food. Only at the mercy of other travelers they were able to survive. Meanwhile, the ship reached the Mannar, a small island called Mannar, and then they dropped these two there in the Mannar because they didn't have anything to eat at all. And then somehow they survived in that village in Mannar. And you know how they survived? They went house to house, door to door, begging. And then people used to give something for them to eat, and somehow they managed to survive. And then after being saved, and then he started sharing his faith there in Mannar. And then he wanted to go to the deep areas, and then he traveled to Jaffna. And as he was going to Jaffna, and Jaffna was the place controlled by the Dutch people, and he was afraid to enter into the village, but he stayed outside in a small shed. His servant and both of them made a small shed, and they were living there. And the daytime they used to go for begging to find out whether any Catholics remaining in the city. And within no time, since they had a very tough journey from India to Sri Lanka, and also because of the weak health they had, they got dysentery. and it was so bad. And then the people, the neighborhood, the people came to know that they have dysentery. And not they, only Joseph was got this dysentery. And then in order to take care of him, his servant used to go to the villages and somehow get some food and everything and bring it to St. Joseph was. And he was struggling to survive. Meanwhile, the villagers came to know that there is someone with this sickness here. They were so afraid. So they knew this sickness can spread. So they carried him. And they carried him and dropped him somewhere outside the village in a lowly place, an open place. And they left him there and told the servant not to come into the village again. And the servant somehow managed to take care of this. Joseph was outside the village in a lonely place. And slowly the servant also got the sickness. And then both of them were lying down each other, next to each other, and they were almost about to die. Meanwhile, an ordinary woman who was passing by happened to see these two men about to die and lying down, crying and praying. And then she was impressed by them and she had compassion for them. She used to bring rice kanji every day for the both of them, morning and evening. And then slowly they survived. They were healed. Once they were healed, they again started going for begging. Remember, Saint Joseph could have lived a holy life, luxurious life, or any peaceful life in his hometown. But he risked his life to preach the gospel, zeal for Christ. He is going through all these confusion, all these crises and trials of his life. He didn't lose faith. He could have at least thought of, okay, now I'm weak, I'm sick, my body is so weak, let me go back to Goa. He could have thought like this, but he was not ready to leave. He went to Jaffna and he went to different villages begging along with his servant John. And he wanted to see, is there any Catholic family? As he was visiting all the families, he came to know there is no Catholic sign. No family has got any picture, rosary or anything. So he knew people are so afraid they don't keep any of these signs of Catholic Church. Therefore, in order to find if there is any Catholic, he tried to risk his life. You know how he risked his life? He put one big rosary on his neck. And with this rosary on his neck, he started begging again. Then the secret Catholics who were living in that village, they noticed this rosary and then they came to know he is a priest. And then slowly the news spread among the Catholics and they slowly gathered and spoke to Father Joseph and then he was managed to gather all the hidden secret Catholics together. And then he wanted to slowly catechize them. He started preaching the sacraments and the Bible. He started teaching them secretly in the underground, and they were educated in the faith. And slowly the number increased. In almost around 1680s, one day he wanted to celebrate Christmas celebration. He arranged everything in such a way that everyone can celebrate Christmas secretly. But meanwhile, there was a Judas in that community. He betrayed him. He went and told the Dutch missionaries and the Dutch government, the officers, and said there is a priest who is mobilizing all the Catholics. Within no time, the Dutch army came and attacked the village, and meanwhile somehow somebody managed to rescue Joseph and his servant, and they were asked to leave the village. And these Dutch people came and destroyed the villages, especially the Catholic families. 7 leaders were killed and others were stripped naked and were imprisoned. And then Joseph was so hurt. Joseph was so hurt and he was so wounded that because of him so many were killed and so many were wounded and so many families were destroyed. But he was not ready to leave. He wanted to evangelize the whole village, the whole of Sri Lanka. And then he went from one place to another. And he went to another place. And then he slowly somehow managed to escape, and he reached the Kandy, the place called Kandy, Kingdom of Kandy. Kingdom of Kandy was controlled by, not by the Dutch missionaries or Dutch people, but the Kingdom of Kandy was controlled by a king of Sri Lanka, Vimal Dharmasurya II. He was the one who was controlling the Kingdom of Kandy, and there was freedom of religion. Therefore, he entered into that country and he started mobilizing all the Catholic families. Though there were so many Catholics, there was no priest available. Therefore, there was no sacraments. There were some catechists who are trying to teach something to the people, but that was not sufficient because the education about sacraments were not given to the people. Then he went to door, and he arranged small confraternities in different parish, different areas. He appointed some catechists. He educated everyone, and he started visiting the sick people and giving the last sacrament. He went door to door and did confession. Just imagine an ordinary man without any facilities, without any car or jeep or anything. He went around to all the houses and evangelized. And the whole village was, the Christianity, Catholic Church was, it became vibrant again after so many years. Then he brought back all the Catholics and he converted and baptized so many people. And meanwhile, there was a French man who happened to see him. He was terribly anti-Catholic. And this Frenchman, when he saw Joseph was converting so many people and mobilizing all the Catholics in the Kingdom of Kandy, this Frenchman could not tolerate. He informed the king, Vimal Dharmasurya, and said, he is a Portuguese spy sent by the Portuguese to Sri Lanka. So please beware of him. And because of this information, this king of Kandy caught him and chained him and put him in the prison. Both of them. But later he came to know he's not so dangerous. Then he was released, but he was under house arrest for so many days. And he appointed some soldiers in disguise to watch over them. And later the king came to know these two people, they were not spies, but they are holy people. They are so religious and they are so prayerful. Then the king had some compassion for them, and the king told them, you should not leave beyond the river which was surrounding that village. They were asked not to go beyond this river, but you can move around. You are out free from the house arrest. Then Saint Joseph was and his servant, both of them were so happy. They came out of the house. It was a small house. They made a shed, the biggest shed, and they kept the cross there, and they started having morning prayer, afternoon prayer, evening prayer in front of the public so that public can watch it. Then slowly looking at them praying every day, morning, afternoon, evening. Joseph was and his servant John kneeling down in front of the cross. Many villages, many public were influenced, inspired, but one by one they started visiting this small house, small shed. And slowly, though remaining Catholic in that village, the new place where they are, in that village, they also slowly started coming with the permission of the king. And then they all gathered in the shed. They started celebrating Christmas. They celebrated all the faith, and he taught them publicly. And sometimes he used to secretly, when he was informed that in the neighboring villages there are so many Catholics who are dying without sacraments, then he used to violate the command of the king, and secretly he used to go beyond the river and go to visit these families and give them sacraments. And since he was a holy man, a man of God, the villagers kept quiet that he is violating the command. And slowly the whole village was so happy that they got a priest, and so many people from other villages started coming to meet him. And meanwhile, there was in the whole over Kandy, there was a famine because drought, because of there was no water, no rain for a long time. And then, since the king of Kandy knew Joseph is a holy man, he is so prayerful, he is so close to God, he called him one day and said, I want to see whether you are so prayerful, or all what you are doing is true or not, or your God is powerful or not. I want to know. Therefore, I ask you to pray to your God. Then he knew that king is testing his faith and testing to know whether he is true or not. Then he told the king, if you are ready to promise me that you will accept and believe in God, believe in our Lord Jesus, I will help you. I will pray for the whole village and also pray for rain. Then he came to the palace of the king. In front of the palace of the king, there was a big junction. In the middle of the junction, he erected one holy cross, a big cross, and then in front of the cross, he knelt down and lifted the hands and started praying. Before his prayer completed, there was a heavy rain. And the whole city, the whole country was and received hours of rain. Looking at these, the king was so impressed, and he allowed him and gave him permission in all his country to go around and preach the gospel and evangelize and baptize whomever he wanted. And then he did it. And he was so happy that he got permission. He went around all the places and converting people, baptizing people, even risking his life. Even when he was weak physically, he was not ready to withdraw. He did not even sleep, but he was going around and baptizing and converting thousands of people. And later, after so many years, and he established small confraternities and appointed catechists to take care of the small places of worship. And he was the only priest available, so he sent some letters to Goa and said, send more priests. And somehow he managed to get 1 or 2 priests again, more. And then one day, when he was doing his ministry there in Kandy, and there was also one day, there was a kind of sickness that spread, smallpox. Smallpox was so dangerous those days, and it spread so fast. All the villages, one by one, started falling sick. And then the villagers were so afraid of this sickness. The moment their family members get sickness, they used to carry these sick people and keep them in the forest and keep them away from the village. And rich people, they started fleeing away from the city Kandy. Even the king, Vimal Dharma Surya, and the whole family, they escaped from that city. They all went out of the country because they were so afraid of this sickness, smallpox. And during this time, you know what Father Joseph did? Father Joseph and his companion priest, both priests, they went to the forest where these people with the smallpox were, thrown and left behind. He went to all the people, all the patients. He washed them. He cleaned their wounds. He was not afraid of the sickness. Both these priests went to all these people who are affected by the smallpox, and he washed them, cleaned their wounds, and took them and gave them medicines. He knew some medicines and all, and he collected, somehow went to the villages and collected medicines, and he took care of all these people. Many of them died in his hands, receiving the last sacrament, and most of them were saved. They relived. They were healed from this smallpox because he was taking care of them so much. He was not afraid of this smallpox, and both of them did not get the smallpox, but they were busy serving for these people. Looking at them, many young boys, youngsters, villagers, they also joined with them. And slowly, they went around all the villages and started taking care of all those people who were infected by the smallpox. And he took care of thousands of people. And once after some years, this sickness stopped. And then the king came back, and king publicly announced, if not Joseph the whole country would have been wiped away. This is what he publicly announced. And my dear brothers and sisters, slowly he became so famous over there, and he had changed the nature of the whole country. And there were so many miracles were attributed to him. Once he happened to walk through the water. When the water was so bad and everyone was afraid to cross the river, he just took the rosary, he prayed, he just started walking on the water. May not be on the water, but he went through the water and asked, and he took all his friends along with him, and it was considered as a miraculous sight, because all the merchants and all the business people who wanted to go across to the river, they were afraid and waiting there for many months. And they were shocked to see this priest leading some group of people and going across to the river. That was when they were, it was called Deduru Oya. There was a place called, and the river called, and he went to the across. There are so many miracles attributed to him. And later, after so many years, in his 59, when he was 59 years old, he died after getting some kind of fever, extreme fever, and he died there in Kandy. And my dear brothers and sisters, Pope John Paul II in 1995, he came to Colombo, Sri Lanka, and he beatified Saint Joseph was. And Pope Francis recently, he canonized Saint Joseph was. My dear brothers and sisters, we should be so proud of this saint whom God has given to the Catholic Church. And if you read and study the life history of all these saints, you will be shocked to see we have such an heritage of faith in our culture and in our tradition of the faith in the Catholic Church. But we have to examine our conscience and see, where is our faith now? Where is our zeal now? Look at our ancestors who worked hard and went to the extent of sacrificing and risking their life to evangelize and bring so many people to the Catholic faith. And they were so successful. That's why many Catholics are there in Sri Lanka, and many Catholics are there in the coastal areas and many places. Just like St. Francis Xavier. My dear brothers and sisters, the whole world is waiting for you. We are all chosen because somebody cries somewhere. When people of Egypt, people of Israelites in Egypt cried, God called Moses. When the lepers in Molokai cried, God called Father Damien. When the people of Calcutta cried, God called Mother Teresa. Somebody somewhere crying in this world, God is calling you. Are you ready to respond? Are you ready to risk your life and get out of your comfort zone and go to the extent, to the end of the earth and preach the gospel? And this is what God is asking you on this day when we are celebrating the feast of Saint Joseph was. Let his life be a challenge in front of you, my dear brothers and sisters. Let his life be a challenge in front of you.